Chapter 2. And it came to pass in the month of Nisan, in the 20th year of Artaxeres the king, that wine was before him, and I took up the wine and gave it unto the king. Now I had not been before time sad in his presence. Wherefore the king said unto me, Why is thy countenance sad, seeing that thou art not sick? This is nothing else but sorrow of heart. Then I was very sore afraid, and said unto the king, Let the king live forever. Why should not my countenance be sad, when the city, the place of my father's sepulchres, lieth waste, and the gates thereof are consumed with fire? Then the king said unto me, For what dost thou make request? So I prayed to the God of heaven. And I said unto the king, If it please the king, and if thy servant have found favor in thy sight, that thou wouldst send me unto Judah, unto the city of my father's sepulchres, that I may build it. And the king said unto me, the queen also sitting by him, For how long shall thy journey be, and when wilt thou return? So it pleased the king to send me, and I sent him a time. Moreover I said unto the king, If it please the king, let letters be given me to the governors beyond the river, that they may convey me over till I come unto Judah. And a letter unto Asaph, the keeper of the king's forest, that he may give me timber to make beams for the gates of the palace, which appertain to the house, and for the wall of the city, and for the house that I shall enter into. And the king granted me according to the good hand of my God upon me. Then I came to the governors beyond the river, and gave them the king's letters. Now the king had set captains of the army and horsemen with me. And when Sanballat the Horonite and Tobiah the servant, the Ammonite, heard of it, it grieved them exceedingly that there was come a man to seek the welfare of the children of Israel. So I came to Jerusalem, and was there 3 days. And I arose in the night, I and some few men with me. Neither told I any man what my God had put in my heart to do at Jerusalem. Neither was there any beast with me, save the beast that I rode upon. And I went out by night by the gate of the valley, even before the dragon well, and to the dung port, and viewed the walls of Jerusalem, which were broken down, and the gates thereof were consumed by fire. Then I went on to the gate of the fountain, and to the king's pool, but there was no place for the beast that was under me to pass. Then went I up in the night by the brook, and viewed the wall, and turned back, and entered by the gate of the valley, and so returned. And the rulers knew not whither I went, or what I did, neither had I yet told it to the Jews, nor to the priests, nor to the nobles, nor to the rulers, nor to the rest that did the work. Then said I unto them, Ye see the distress that we are in, how Jerusalem lieth waste, and the gates thereof are burned with fire. Come, and let us build up the wall of Jerusalem, that we be no more a reproach. Then I told them of the hand of my God, which was good upon me, as also the king's words that he had spoken unto me. And they said, Let us rise up and build. So they strengthened their hands for this good work. But when Sanballat the Horonite, and Tobiah the servant of the Ammonite, and Geshem the Arabian heard it, they laughed us to scorn, and despised us, and said, What is this thing that ye do? Will ye rebel against the king? Then answered I them, and said unto them, The God of heaven, he will prosper us. Therefore we, his servants, will arise and build, but ye have no portion, no right, no memorial in Jerusalem. The events that are taking place here, we know that Artaxerxes ruled in the Persian Empire from 465 years before Christ to 425 years before Christ. And as this took place in the 20th year of his reign, we're looking at 445 BC. And this is a story, this is all first person, so this is, we believe, the exact history as Nehemiah wrote it. And he says he had never been sad before the king before, and you never really wanted to be sad before the king that you were serving, because they might get an idea that maybe you were trying to poison them, in which case it was off with your head. But obviously Artaxerxes trusted his cupbearer and said, asked him what the problem was. And Nehemiah told him that the city of the sepulchres of his fathers was, destroyed, and the gate burned with fire, and all the rest of it. And the king would have known that, or been able to verify that, because it was part of the Babylonian captivity, and the Persians took over from the Babylonians. And so all that happened there was he gave him permission to go. asked him when he would come back. He says, so he set him a time. He sent captains, and this is important, captains of the army and horsemen. When you sent captains of the army, these were senior officers in command. You did not send the senior officers with minor officials. And we know that Nehemiah went with papers to make him governor of Judah, which had been formerly governed from Samaria by a fellow named Sanballat, who was the governor of the area. And we also believe from other records that it took about 5 years for Nehemiah to go from Susa, which was the name of the city, where the palace of Shushan was, which is where Esther's story was, the book of Esther took place, and believe that the reason it took the 5 years was that Nehemiah was actually entrusted with setting a whole bunch of affairs in order with all the provinces he traveled through. And it wasn't that it took that long to travel. It probably would have taken 6 or 7 months to travel the distance. But as he was so highly trusted by Artaxerxes, that he had responsibilities to make sure that everything was in order as wherever he went. There is some historical context for this. Anyway, Nehemiah gets to Samaria, gives his documents to Sanballat, who is the governor. Sanballat is not amused. It says Sanballat was a Horonite. Now, that wouldn't mean anything to the vast majority of people, but there are 2 towns that are really close together called Beth Horon, which are in Samaria. It was about 25 miles northwest of Jerusalem. And there's also a town called Horon that is in Moab, which is on the east side of the Dead Sea. And if you were from both places, either place, you could have hated the Jews, literally, because Moab had been conquered by David, and the Jews had come up on the right-hand side, on that side of the Dead Sea, and had sort of taken over the place. And if you were in Beth Horon, was settled by people who were partly Jews and partly not Jews, and they didn't want a strong Jerusalem. That would have been a problem to them. That would have taken away from their right, they felt, to preside and be the bosses of the area. They also would have lost the tax ability to collect taxes, and the fewer taxes you collect, the fewer you could skim off for yourself. So this governor of Samaria, Sanballat, was not happy. He strongly opposed the rebuilding of the walls. And Nehemiah learned pretty well, hey, we better watch this. He got to Jerusalem and didn't announce who he was to anybody in the city. Stayed there for 3 days and then took a nice trip out to see what the walls were like. Now, the interesting thing about his description is that if you have a sort of map of Jerusalem, you can tell exactly where he went. And we have an idea of what now, as a result of how he described it, of how the Babylonians got into the city of David and the city of Jerusalem, which is, the city of David is part of the city of Jerusalem, how they got in there, and the damage that they did, and how much of the damage they did. And then he told the people, called the meeting of the people, and they started to get organized on the rebuilding.